how intoxicated a person is. Now, granted, everybody has different tolerances, and this person's 0.2 level of alcohol in their blood will be a lot different than somebody else who's not used to alcohol or not used to drinking. But when it comes to cannabis, there really is no level per se that you can say they're intoxicated or not. And giving a patient that you've just medicated yourself, which possibly made you much more stable and able to work, that level might be high, but it's not, has nothing to do with your functional ability. Anyway, again, these chemicals are transported cellularly. They participate in a wide range of biological processes. From the animal studies, from the mice studies, it literally looks like they're involved in almost every activity in our body. Again, as I said, it's there to maintain stress, to balance us with stress. It is degraded by this enzyme, we call it Fa, and that again is something that it looks to the scientists to say maybe this is medicine we can have. We can plan medicine by interfering with the Fa so it won't break down the endocannabinoids, which would leave them in the body lasting longer. So they're still outside looking at manipulation. At the same time, we're looking at using the plant maybe and letting it do its work on its own. Kind of a picture you've seen before. This is, again, just showing the lock and key. And I apologize, I don't have a pointer, but that's like a nerve cell picture there. And you've got the presynaptic between this cleft where molecules will pass, and then the postsynaptic end of a nerve cell. And we're going to talk a little bit about how this goes. This is unique too. Generally, I shouldn't have done that. Generally, we're seeing signals. Sorry, that's right. No, I won't. But anyway, signals going from up down, traveling through, and instead we're going to see retrograde. It's going to go backwards to influence activity. It might need to slow something down. It might need to speed something up, whether it be seizure activity. It needs to slow the firing down to stop seizure activity. So we call it retrograde. It means it's going backwards. So these chemicals are made on demand as needed. Something's going on. And again, this is so complicated. I'm giving you such an overview here. I can go listen to the different researchers talking about this, and on the molecular level, there are so many little reactions going on all the time, and yet at the same time, this is one throughout the body that is going on minute by minute, second by second, just keeping us in balance. So it's hard to try to break it down and look at it so simply, but that's what we're doing here. I think the biggest thing here you want to know, though, is we don't have drugs that can do that will work when we need them. We take a medication and it works. It does something, and generally as a pill, it will do something. If you're trying to help with the heart rate, okay, it might slow the heart rate and keep it at a good rate. It may be doing something else in the body as well that's not as good in balance. We know that. Think of opiates. You're dulling the pain, you're hoping to do that. Well, it's slowing the bowels. Okay, so it's helping with the pain, and now we got to worry about constipation, which is a serious problem with opiates. So you kind of think about that. Whereas cannabis is something that's kind of interacting with the body's own endocannabinoid system, which just seems to kind of know what it needs to do when it's working well. So cannabis, looking at it as a medicine, it's regulating, again, these are neurotransmitters. A lot of the medications we use are meant to have an influence on these different transmitters to help with mood, to help with different problems. So they're acting on these transmitters. Well, this is our endocannabinoid system normally regulates our GABA, an inhibitory neurotransmitter, or glutamate. I know many of you have heard about that. And it can help influence the glutamate by selectively suppressing that. Brett Gerdeman is a biologist in Florida, and he had the, I don't know if I say luxury, but he happened to get his PhD at the time when the endocannabinoid system was discovered. So he spent a lot of time learning about it. But his way of describing it is it's like it's putting on the endocannabinoids are like putting on the brakes when a toxic level of excitation is approached. But that's it. They modulate needs to dampen something down, or it needs to perk something up in your body just to keep you in balance. So when you think of the endocannabinoid system, we've got receptors, as I said, cannabinoid CB1 receptors, CB2 receptors. You've got your own endocannabinoids. I mentioned 2. It looks like there are more, and the research is ongoing. This is going to keep researchers busy for many, many years to help explain it more and more to us. And then you've got the enzymes that help synthesize the endocannabinoids when needed and break them down when their function's done, and you just need to get them out of the body. So it's that whole system that makes up our endocannabinoid system. Vincenzo De Marzo is a researcher in Italy, and back in the late 90s, I think he wrote an article, but he summed up the endocannabinoid system. It helps us eat, sleep, relax, protect, and forget. That's a lot. But again, you want to know that this system is that important in the body. And if just briefly, when you think of eating, we know the munchies, appetite stimulant. It's also good for nausea and vomiting. And we're looking at the newborn mice to literally get them to suckle, to go eat. Sleeping, one of the best medicines out there for sleep. A lot of patients might use Ambien or some kind of medication for sleep. There's some studies that'll say that a lot of those early morning traffic accidents are somebody who's still sleeping, asleep more or less, but having the drug effects, going to work in the morning and fall asleep at the wheel. Cannabis is a natural sleep medicine. I've got an old I think it was 1920 something, but Bloom Garden's pharmacology book for nurses. And it's got 3 pages on cannabis, and then one line is bold, and it says it relieves pain and induces sleep. So again, for years, we've known that this is a really good medicine. The endocannabinoid system is also involved in relaxing, and again, I look at that in many ways. Literally relaxing anxious people can help relax with muscle spasms. So you can think of it in a lot of ways in general in that regard. Protecting, it's a neuroprotectant. It can actually help protect your nerve cells. This is really important. We're going to see more and more research on the head injuries. I think everyone's probably heard the news if you've seen the movie Concussion with CTE, the chronic traumatic encephalopathy. That's football players, but it could be your soccer players, Muhammad Ali, a boxer. Repeated hits to the head, the brain doesn't recover. Another hit to the head, and it adds to the point that you get what they call chronic traumatic, over time, traumatic injuries to the head, encephalopathy, and leading to a problem. And this was hard to diagnose. Bennett O'Malley is the Nigerian physician who discovered it and really took his own time because he knew something was wrong. How could these young football players, how can we explain why they are feeling so out of sorts? The aggression is high. They're not the same. The family would be going, this is not who I married. And literally either committing suicide or getting in trouble because of what was going on in their brain. And it was only on autopsy that he could figure out, oh my goodness, this is chronic hits to the head, which is really waking up the football, the National Football League and others to say, this should not be a drug forbidden for football players, for sports players. It's something we need to do. So it's a neuroprotectant in that regard. It's also a protectant that it's the endocannabinoid system to an extent that says, I think again, Mara had said something about, we have cancer cells. We do. We've got cancer cells that are in our body. The hope is that our body recognizes a cancer cell and gets rid of it, makes it commit suicide, called apoptosis. But that's what the endocannabinoid system is kind of saying, you're not a good-looking cell, you're not healthy, and literally start this chain reaction to have the cell commit suicide. And then forgetting. Naturally, we think about forgetting such as childbirth pain for women, so hopefully women would continue to have children as opposed to remember the horrific pain, and I'm not going to do that again. But it's a survival mode. You can't get stuck in fear so much that you can't move forward or can't change, can't do things. The forgetting is immensely important for those with post-traumatic stress. And it helps explain why so many veterans, as a veteran, I guess I'm partial to them, but when I think of post-traumatic stress and a combat veteran, it's kind of the extreme post-traumatic stress you can think of. I mean, we can think of rape, and we can think of robbery, we can think of horrific accidents, But for a lot of those soldiers, it's repetitive. It's, go out and kill somebody again, go out and have somebody's brains splattered all over you, or just the terrible things. They come home and they can't deal with it. And cannabis literally helps it kind of get pushed back in their head so it's not there in front of them every day. So now I think that this kind of helped me. Again, as a nurse, I get the information. Our role in nursing is basically patient care, patient education, patient advocacy. Working in a hospital, and I can say this for so many nurses that I do know, a lot of us are really tired of giving medications to patients only to know that half hour later, 15 minutes later, an hour later, we're going to have to come back and give them another medication for the side effect, for the problem. They got nauseated from it. Now we've got to fix that. They got too drugged. They fell. Now we've got to deal with that. Whatever it is, we're giving a lot of drugs, and we're kind of realizing they're not helping that much. We're seeing a lot of side effects. Then we find out about cannabis, and we find out, oh my goodness, it's not going to have that bad side effect. So it's something we really want. So I try to give that overall picture, and you're thinking, I know the researchers will just talk about, this is what my study shows, and can't go further. Where they're stuck now is a lot of these studies are mouse studies. And so it's hard to say, yes, that's going to happen to a human too, although we can kind of predict it. And so sometimes I might jump further than a researcher in terms of my interpretation of this. But I kind of think it's common sense, and I think the researchers in many ways kind of could see where people are going with this. What I'm saying is where I'm going with this, if it's really important for all mice and their diseases, I think the endocannabinoid system, its role is clearly important in humans, and I think cannabis is a good answer for humans. But unfortunately, everybody wants to see the double-blind, placebo-controlled studies in humans, except that our government doesn't let us do those studies in the United States, so it's a tough one. Anyway, all that being said, Ethan Russo in 2004 came up with this idea about a clinical endocannabinoid deficiency, and he was able, with what we understood at the endocannabinoid system at the time, looking at the science, he could make the case, and it's a pretty in-depth article, but he could make the case that it looked like migraine, headaches, fibromyalgia, and idiopathic bowel syndrome, the different diseases, Crohn's, etc., are probably an endocannabinoid deficiency. Our own system is deficient, and we're getting these symptoms that are arising because it's not in balance anymore. Things aren't being regulated right. And how do you fix that? When we have diabetics and their insulin's not working, we give them insulin. When we've got someone whose thyroid's not working, we give them a Synthroid. So it just makes common sense that if your endocannabinoid system's not working, cannabis could be a good medicine. Well, in 2016, he expanded on that, and now look at it. He's looking at the endocannabinoid system and the science of how we understand it to explain a deficiency in that can help explain motion sickness, multiple sclerosis, diabetic neuropathy, Huntington's disease, Parkinson's disease, post-traumatic stress symptoms, major depression, anorexia nervosa, autistic spectrum disorders. And there's been some kind of an issue about autism just seems to be increasing. People are wondering why, and I know there's a lot of people that worry about the vaccines and things like that, but what is it with the fact that cannabis has been around since the beginning of man, and yet we, the United States, started that prohibition in 1937, so we're going on, over, what, 7, 8, up to 8 decades now of no cannabis. They would hope with the prohibition. We're not supposed to have any, but that doesn't work. But the idea that that's been out of the lifestyle of not as a medicine by humans anymore. We're not using the plant as they have for centuries, and are we literally hurting ourselves by not having something that can supplement our own system that is there to keep us in balance? So what can you do? There are things you can. The point being here that cannabis is an exogenous source. Not all cannabis is equal. The research we want to see is what's going to work best, what combinations will work best. As you know, cannabis, from the talk earlier, it's not just the cannabinoids. The terpenes are very important in terms